Reflecting this evening on the works of Herman Melville, which I have been studying for a number of years, and I had intended to do some extensive commentaries on them because I had spent so long studying them. I spent about a year reading the novels of Melville and about a year reading Moby Dick, so maybe about 2 years studying the works of Herman Melville, and I find him to be a very important writer on American history and on the American Revolution, and especially in that crucial period that he writes Moby Dick prior to the Civil War. So I find him to be one of the most important novelists in American history. And I have Billy Budd in front of me here that I'm reconsidering again, and some problems of interpretation relating to Billy Budd that I would like to raise. One of the most interesting points in that particular novel, Billy Budd, which is really a short story, it's a novella, it's a short novel of approximately 100 or 130 pages. It might be longer than that, but I'm going to approximate it at about 130 pages. It's a quick read. If anybody would like to read it, it probably would take you maybe a couple hours, 2 to 4 hours of time to read it, and it's well worth reading because it's about a sailor. Billy Budd is his name, in fact, and the sailor happens to be an excellent but very naive sailor, and his naivete in the story proves to be his undoing in a way. But one of the most important features of the novel is the way that it displays the relationship between American freedom and British sovereignty, and the way it presents British sovereignty as being, at that time, at the time of the novel's set, at the time that the novel was set, the fear that was going on in the Navy about mutinies in the Navy, and how Billy Budd comes to be this kind of almost Christ-like figure that symbolizes a sacrifice that had to be made for the Navy to be stabilized. It was, I believed, there had been prominent mutinies. There had been the Norm Mutiny, and there had been one other mutiny. I can't remember the name right now. But so the idea is kind of, to my own interpretation, is that the captain, who is a very well-educated and a very sly figure and a very cunning figure in this novel, I might even liken him, as Melville suggests throughout the story, to the serpent in Genesis, because the captain of the novel, he establishes the conditions whereby Billy Budd, who has a kind of speech impediment, and he's accused in the novel of being guilty of mutiny by the sergeant-at-arms. His name is Claggart, and in the novel he's a representation of Satan because he walks like a clubfoot. And so Melville indicates that he is a representation of Satan because they speaks about how he's a clubfoot and he walks club-footedly through the ship. And so so Melville has in mind Satan in Genesis as kind of the background setting for Billy Budd, and he portrays this very sly and clever and intelligent and urbane and cosmopolitan Captain Vere, who sets, in my opinion, in my interpretation, he sets Billy Budd up for this mutiny so he can take his life in front of the Navy. And it's a fascinating work, well worth anyone's time at interpreting and studying, because it does bring up such deep resonances of freedom in America and how Billy Budd is impressed by the British at the beginning of this story, and how he then, in my view, is kind of set up, as I said, by Captain Vere of the ship, and how Captain Vere actually sacrifices him before the Navy in order to stabilize the Navy. And if you're a careful reader of it, there's some very interesting puzzles in there of interpretation that I think are well worth anyone's time and would be fascinating to anybody who loves American history and American history in the Revolutionary period particularly.